The initial reports coming in that it is the duel to the White House in which Mitt Romney has taken Kentucky and Obama has taken Vermont. As expected, Romney was to win Kentucky and he has got the state with 8 electoral votes. Now Obama has got Vermont with 3 votes. What we are getting to know as well is that Obama is leading in New Hampshire while Romney in Indiana. Indiana has 11 electoral votes. Indiana largely a Republican state till now. Romney leading there while Obama leading in New Hampshire. But what we can confirm to our viewers at present is that as expected, Romney has taken Kentucky and Obama Vermont. Romney gets 8 electorates from Kentucky and Obama 3. Let's cut across to the international channel Al Jazeera, keeping track of the current development.
Feminism isn't out front to make sure that that's not a problematic relationship.
And yet, curiously, we were talking about this earlier, the minute that the governor did start to speak about his faith in a way that it appears to be so genuine with him and to be something that he deeply cares about, it did seem to humanize him in an interesting way that he was not before. And he refused to speak about it for many, many months on the campaign trail. And when he did start to talk about it, there really was a sense that this was helping to define him and helping to shape him in a way that quite a lot of people liked.
Well, we're going to be chatting any second now to somebody who knows Mitt Romney pretty well. Mitchell Reese, foreign policy advisor to Governor Romney, joining us from Republican headquarters in Boston, in Massachusetts. Mitchell Reese, thanks very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. A point made by our panel then, and I'll get on to foreign policy in just a moment if I may, is that once Mitt Romney started to talk about his faith, he became more of a human figure to the voters of the United States. Knowing him as you do, was it very difficult for him to do this?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please? It just came through a little garbled.
Okay, I'm going to start at the very beginning. We were talking then about Mitt Romney's personality and how he had decided to talk about his faith more openly in the last 2 months. Knowing him as you do, because we're just trying to find out the character of the man, knowing him as you do, was it very difficult for him to do that?
Well, I think it was a bit of a challenge, in part because we live in a celebrity culture, and especially during a presidential campaign, there's this incessant demand to reveal yourself and your innermost thoughts. And the governor's very comfortable with his faith, with his family, with his patriotism, but that doesn't mean that he has to go about bragging about it. And so it took him a little bit of time to find that middle path where he felt comfortable, where he didn't feel that it was revealing too much or too much like bragging, because he's actually a pretty modest guy despite all his accomplishments.
Do you think
he really hit his stride in the last few weeks of this campaign?
Yeah, well, was he perhaps a little bit nervous?
Pardon me?
Was he perhaps a little bit nervous that if he spoke about his faith, his Mormonism, that it might actually put some voters off?
Well, I don't think so. This was an issue that came up during the last election cycle. He gave a very important speech, a revealing speech about his faith on the campaign trail in 2008. I just think that it wasn't that much of an issue this time as it was in the last cycle, but it was something that revealed the depth of his passion, of his values, of his commitment to family and friends, and I think that it resonated with the American people.
Mitchell Reese, I know you've come on to talk about foreign policy. That is your area of expertise. Let me ask you how difficult it has been, perhaps, educating Mitt Romney about the wider world. Do you accept that when he first started out on the presidential trail, he was perhaps a bit naive?
Well, you know, I think that this is a narrative that the governor's critics have sort of stuck themselves on. I don't think that he's naive in any way that's really meaningful for foreign policy. After all, he was a very successful businessman, traveled all over the world for many years. He ran the Olympics, which gave him even more exposure overseas. Together, we traveled to Asia, to the Middle East, to Europe. He's a pretty sophisticated individual, and he's got a pretty sophisticated understanding of the way the international economy works and how to preserve the security and the safety of the United States. And so I don't really buy that he's been naive. I think that that's a criticism that's really without much substance.
But does sophistication cover the fact that when he went to London, he appeared to upset a lot of people there by saying that he didn't think the Olympics were going to be a success, that because of currency manipulation allegedly in China, he's called them cheaters. Is this a man who can do deals with foreign governments or perhaps just upset them?
Well, I think that these are separate issues. In London, I think he was voicing a genuine concern that he has because he cares so much about the success of the Olympic movement. And it was a concern, I think, that was expressed by British officials in private, as well as other observers. So again, I think this was a case of a politician being criticized for speaking the truth. With China being a currency manipulator, I'm not sure that this is a partisan issue at all. In fact, that there are many Democrats who believe that China has manipulated its currency.
It was the use of the word cheaters that I was really referring to, not the issue, but the way he dealt with it, calling them cheaters.
Well, I think that's strong language, but I think that it's strong language that's merited because the governor's concerned about losing American jobs when other countries don't play fair. And so I think the governor is all in favor of free trade. This administration really has not advanced a free trade agenda. Governor Romney as president would. But again, it has to be a level playing field, and the rules should apply equally to everybody.
Let me ask you specifically about your dealings with Governor Romney regarding terrorism, for want of a better word. You've just written a book called Negotiating with Evil, in which you suggest it would be a good idea to sit down and talk to a variety of people worldwide, but yet Mitt Romney suggests that there's no point in talking to the Taliban until they stop fighting. Where do you both stand on that?
Well, I'm so flattered that you've read my book, but if you've read it carefully, you'll understand that, in fact, there are a number of preconditions that have to be in place in order for any negotiation to be effective. And the reality is that very few, if any, of those preconditions were in place with this administration's negotiations with the Taliban. They showed an excess of zeal to reach a deal with them, and of course the Taliban took advantage of that. We don't have a deal with the Taliban. The governor has said that the best option is if you can kill or capture all these folks. But in the last debate, he also said that that probably isn't possible in all cases. And therefore, when the conditions are right, it may be possible to sit down and talk to them. That needs to be done on a case-by-case basis. And so, again, to try to paint him as an unreconstructed Cold Warrior, I just think is really a caricature that doesn't do justice to the way he views the world.
Mitchell Reese, we thank you very much indeed for battling not only with my questions but also with the music in the background. I'm sure it's only going to get louder. We understand that there are two playlists depending on the different scenarios at the end of the night. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Mitchell Reese there in Boston.
My pleasure.
And this is Kamal Santamaria in Doha.
Thank you very much, David. No songs from me just yet. We are midnight 30 GMT at this point, which is 7:40 p.m. almost on the East Coast, and we've got some more projections for you. What do you know? Ohio's too close to call. 18 electoral college votes. Just a point, that's two fewer than last time because the way the population has changed in the United States since the last election. So we're too close to call in Ohio. We are also too close to call in North Carolina with its 15. And this was, maybe up until a few weeks ago, actually considered a swing state, leaning red, we would say now, but you know, a little too close to call at this point. While we're talking Carolinas, we'll talk South Carolina, which was actually from the last lot of projections we were talking about half an hour ago. That is now a projected win for Mitt Romney with 9 electoral college votes. And the last one we've got for you is West Virginia, 5 electoral college votes. Those are Mitt Romney's. So we get this on the Electoral College scoreboard. Barack Obama stays at 3, Mitt Romney at 33. Again, please don't read too much into this at the moment because these first two lots of reportings are very heavily weighted in red states, if you like. We're going to see a lot more strong blue states coming out in the next half hour, an hour or so. Come with me to the map and we'll just put it all up here so you can see how the map is starting to colour up just at this point. And here it comes. We will have a whole swathe of reds through there. Indiana, as I said, South Carolina's just come in there. 3 states are too close to call at the moment. They are Ohio, Virginia, and North Carolina. And the sole 3 electoral college votes for Barack Obama at this point are from Vermont. It is 33-3 at the moment. David.
Kamal, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Kamal Santamaria. We go to New Jersey on the eastern seaboard of the United States. We talked to John Terrett. John, you covered an awful lot of the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, and we're still seeing its effect. In terms of the way people are being able to vote,
what do you do, David, in New York City when 250,000 people are being told to find alternative voting arrangements today? And here in New Jersey, where the governor says of the 3,400 polling stations that there are, around 100 of them are unable to function, and people have had to find other alternative arrangements as well. Well, the answer is several things. First of all, they've amalgamated a number of polling sites into one. We're at a school in Toms River, New Jersey, very close to some of the widespread devastation caused by Superstorm Sandy, and normally just one group of people, one area would come here to vote on polling day. Today it is 6. Governor Cuomo, who's the governor of New York, issued an affidavit yesterday in which he allowed people to vote at any polling station of their choosing in the city. We are hearing that that hasn't worked so well for some New Yorkers, that they're unhappy, that they've actually been to an alternative polling station and been turned away. And here in New Jersey, Governor Christie issued a new rule allowing people to vote by email. And we're hearing that so many tried to do that the website crashed a few hours ago, and now they've extended the deadline all the way through until 8 o'clock in the evening local time on Friday, which means that those who vote by affidavit in New York and those who chose to vote by email here in New Jersey will not have their votes counted today. They will now have to wait until Friday before those votes can be counted. And that means, of course, in the event that this election is very, very tight, as it was in year 2000 with Bush and Gore, the people voting in this way may well have a big impact on the outcome, although not necessarily here in New Jersey or in New York or Connecticut, the 3 states that were affected by Hurricane Sandy, because generally speaking, these states trend towards the Democratic Party. David.
John, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask one of you to volunteer to answer this question. Did Superstorm Sandy do the president a lot of good?
We don't know. We know that people applauded the way he responded. We know that what his response was, in fact, very well thought of by polling. What is not, and in fact, there are some polling questions that are coming out that indicate that people, in fact, did base their vote in part on how the president responded. What we don't know is if it changed any votes. Clearly, he got very good marks for it. What's not clear is whether it made anybody switch from voting for Governor Romney to voting for President Obama.
Now, you 3 know a great deal more about American politics than I do, but I don't know whether you know this fact. There was a Princeton survey that showed that natural disasters can sometimes be blamed on the incumbent president and hurt his rating, and they used as an example the fact that in 1916 in New Jersey there were a number of shark attacks which the electorate apparently blamed on Woodrow Wilson.
Well,
and he lost 8 percentage points.
And guess what, David? There are people who believe that we never really landed on the moon, that it was all done in a Hollywood back lot. So you could find any number of things like that.
Can I tick that off as one you didn't know?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That's all I wanted.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We'll give you that one.
Thanks very much indeed. Now, this election, more than any other, probably has seen a dramatic increase in negative ads, commercials which attack everything from a candidate's character to his policies, and both Obama and Romney have spared no expense.
Obama's second term would be a rerun of the first, and our country just couldn't survive that.
Our enemies have been brought to justice. The last thing we should do is turn back now.
Mitt Romney, tough on China? Since when?
I call it an apology tour. You skipped Israel, our closest friend in the region.
If he wins, we lose.
He's not just wasting money, he's borrowing it and then wasting it.
Since Obama became president, gas prices have nearly doubled.
Big Oil's fingerprints are all over him.
23 million Americans struggling for work.
He outsourced state jobs to a call center in India. Romney economics. It didn't work then, and it won't work now.
We need solutions, not just promises.
President Obama knows that fairness for women means a stronger middle class.
China is stealing American ideas and technology. Obama had years to stand up to China.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
I'm Mitt Romney, and I approve this message.
Yeah, perhaps no wonder that little Abigail Evans was in tears over that, but we've got something to cheer her up now. Shia Bratansi's in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that we've seen this deluge of negative advertising following a Supreme Court ruling which has allowed for the first time in elections unlimited campaign contributions, or at least rather not unlimited campaign contributions, unlimited contributions to get involved with the political issues. Actually, it is rather interesting to pass out because there are these sort of grey areas. I unwittingly suggested the greyness of some of this dark money that's actually involved. But what has been the impact then of that Supreme Court decision? Perhaps, John, you can explain exactly why this election was different.
Well, this is the first year where corporations and labor unions could spend directly on issue advocacy and putting out campaign ads for particular candidates and identify the candidates in the ads. And this has really helped have an explosion in this advertising barrage. So if you live in Northern Virginia or Ohio or Florida, you cannot turn on the television without finding out how ugly all of the candidates running for every political office are.
But then there's also this dark money, which can be given by companies too.
The reality is the dark money means that the finances can't be traced, that they're actually super empowered individuals who are wealthy are giving monies to C4 nonprofit organizations, and then they're giving monies to other organizations, and then you can't track where the money's coming from. And so the reality is that the Citizens United case that passed the Supreme Court in 2010 actually gave wealthy individuals more power in our democracy than normal citizens.
So how has that manifested itself in this campaign, would you say, Maya?
So the way it's manifested itself in the campaign is that you have wealthy individuals dropping money into campaigns at last minute. They're investing in ads that are attack ads where you don't know clearly who it's coming from, and so they can actually shape the race itself by dropping this money in and funding these ads as a form of freedom of expression. So the Supreme Court says. Right.
John Ferry, as a Republican strategist, do you think then that this is finally unfettered democracy in action, or do you have any misgivings about this?
Well, every time I watch the ads, I have misgivings because it gets kind of annoying after a while. But, we do have a First Amendment in the United States, and you are able to put all of your resources, if you want to, into a political campaign or into supporting candidates. And this wasn't just before Citizens United, you had George Soros and you had all kinds of the MoveOn.org. You had all kinds of resources being poured into organizations that were very much issue advocacy. This has kind of changed the game a little bit, but not that much.
A whole lot. It's unlimited contributions. And the reality is the game was not being played at this level before 2010. And the reality, we are in a democracy. It used to be, it's supposed to be one person, one vote. But the reality is that wealthy individuals have more power in this country than individuals do.
What is the quid pro quo? We were talking earlier in a panel discussion how when President Obama became president, we now know from various insider accounts his main concern was the banks and giving them a soft landing and not allowing foreclosure adjustments and so forth for homeowners. It's no coincidence he was heavily funded by Wall Street. Is there a direct correlation you can see between the money that these people are putting in and what they want for that money?
Listen, I don't think so. I think that when President Obama was doing that, he wasn't trying to make the banks feel good about it. I think what he's trying to do, and not to defend President Obama, but I think he had policy on his mind about how to get more credit to homeowners. I think he did it the wrong way, but I don't think I worked with a lot of politicians. I know them very well. And yes, money does influence what they do, but doesn't directly tell them how to do it. On either the Republican or Democratic side, they represent mostly their constituents and mostly, ways to get themselves reelected.
I think campaign operatives and politicians always keep it in the back of their minds who's contributed to what. And when they come into office to run the nation, they think about these things. And the question in this election is, how will these contributions actually affect the question of the fiscal cliff, deficit and debt reduction? Will whoever takes office feel like they owe a debt to these people who actually made significant contributions to their election?
But do you think that's why on economic policy, both President Obama and Mitt Romney are speaking from a fundamentally similar ideological framework of deficit reduction and austerity, as opposed to stimulus and income inequality?
Which brings the question, what is the influence of these dollars? Because the reality is the nation needs job creation. We need stimulus. And to talk about deficit reduction is to basically bring austerity into the equation. Austerity at a time that our nation's economy can't actually handle it. So who are the real masters here?
John, as a Republican strategist, even you must have seen how far to the right President Obama has got. And do you think?
That's not how I see it. Listen, I think President Obama has very defined views that are far separate than President Romney or candidate Romney, and I think you would agree with that they have different views. I think that there are different views on how to stimulate this economy. I think the Republicans believe that much more in private sector stimulation through tax cuts. I think the Obama campaign and Obama presidency has believed in much more government spending to stimulate the economy. This is a philosophical difference, and I think that this difference is played out every day. And this campaign is they've both come to the middle because they want to get the voters in the middle, but they have sharp ideological differences.
I wouldn't say that they're that sharp, and this is why.
It's always good getting John Kerry to defend President Obama.
The Obama administration has actually, and a lot of their representatives have actually said that they're for something called Simpson Bowls, which is a deficit reduction framework that only raises $1 in revenue for every $2.50 in cuts. And so, if you're talking about somebody who's so desperate to spend and so desperate to save the safety net and entitlement programs, the folks who are supporting this on the Democratic side, including those in the Obama administration, don't seem to be typical Democrats, if you will.
All right, Maya Rockeymoore, thank you very much. Sean Feary, thank you. Back to Doha.
Shihab, back to me in terms of my voice, but here we are a bit north of where we saw Shihab Rattansi and his guest there. This is New York City. Still bustling, although we did comment here in the studio when we saw the picture, there weren't that many people out. They are looking at a whole host of information there. There's Lynn Sherr's old company, ABC News, there, suggesting that at the moment it's Obama 3, Romney 33. And you saw a couple of interesting things on the ticker on the other side of the street of Times Square. What was it?
Oh, I was looking at the Indiana Senate race, which is the state treasurer, Richard Murdoch, against U.S. Representative Joe Donnelly. And this, of course, is the seat where Mr. Murdoch is the Republican, Mr. Donnelly the Democrat. Mr. Murdoch is a Tea Party candidate supported by the Tea Party, and he ousted longtime, very respected Republican Senator Richard Lugar in the primary. And now Mr. Murdoch, because of some, shall we say, intemperate comments he made about rape, finds himself in a very tight race.
Let's roll through to pictures out of Virginia. This is Arlington, Virginia. Not exactly sure what we're seeing there. First glance, it looks like pizza delivery to me. It's Miami, apparently, even though we say it's Arlington, but they eat pizzas in Miami as well, I'm sure. I can't tell what that is. It's one of those shots we get offered up. We have no control over that one. It's vote counting, that's what it is. And that is Miami. That's a state where we've got one of our correspondents. We'll go to Andy Gallagher a little bit later, but the polls closed in Ohio around about 50 minutes ago. Still very little that we can say about what we've heard. But let's go to Scott Heidler, who is in Akron. Sorry, around about 25 minutes ago, I think, Scott, I'm right on that one. What are the people there saying?
Well, yeah, the polls just closed, and we know this is going to be a squeaker. And as you see the results come in, obviously this is way too close to tell right now. One thing we do know that will start to happen once the results start to come in, they count the early votes first, the votes that have been cast over the past month. Those who went out to polling stations right through the weekend, right through Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock before Tuesday polls opened at 6:30 a.m. Those votes will be counted first, and those traditionally go to President Barack Obama, to the Democratic Party. So we're going to see kind of an uptick initially once those results start to come in, but that could very soon change based on the fact that once the early votes are counted. Now, let's bring in a voter himself, Dan Adams. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, voted today. Who did you vote for, and why, and how important is it that it's, Ohio, all eyes are on Ohio right now?
Well, I've been working, I'm actually with the Tea Party here in Akron, and I voted mail-in a couple weeks ago, so I could work the polls and such today. So, real exciting time. I was doing voter registration cards today and voter guides for the Republican Party, and that was going really well. I have my own little straw poll I was doing as we were passing out cards with the Democrats there, and spent most of the day with a couple of young Obama poll watchers out in the parking lot comparing notes.
What shot do you think Mitt has? I mean, going into this, Obama had a slight lead, and this is a big state for the Republican Party. No president has gone on to the White House, or no candidate has gone on to the White House.
We know that very well.
And what do you think is going to really kind of tip the scales, if you will, because going into this, Mitt is the slight underdog.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the excitement that the Republican Party has shown, both from our conservative groups as well as the party itself. And this year, the Republicans have a ground game, which we've never had in the past. And just one comment I had from a person leaving the poll today, he says, "Will you Republicans just quit calling me? I already voted for you," so they were getting a lot of calls. We've really been working it hard.
Why do the Republicans have the formula, if you will, as you see it, to correct the economy, to get the country back on track, if you will, on the economic front?
Well, the economy is the big thing, and the candidate for the Republicans, Mitt Romney, certainly has a lot of experience in the business sector. We don't feel that the president really had that background coming in as being the leader. So it is a difference running a company and making a balance sheet work. So we feel really good about having that type of business leader to run the nation.
And staying on business, one of the industries, the businesses that is very, very important here in Ohio, that's the auto industry. This is kind of the parts pipeline going up north to the big plants in Michigan and across the Midwest.
Absolutely.
President Obama saved a lot of those companies. We were at one earlier today, just on the other side of Akron, that was saved because of that bailout. And that saved, just in that one plant, 300 jobs. Maybe Mitt Romney has some business experience, but Obama saved a lot of jobs here in Ohio.
There are a lot of jobs saved, but really those companies, there's still some weaknesses in those companies. The job wasn't done completely. And I'm sure, this is my personal opinion, that Mitt Romney didn't want to say that a lot of the core issues there at GM and Chrysler still have not been taken care of. And so
is it better than just to let them go into bankruptcy and then they maybe even have to go through deeper cuts than bail them out?
A controlled bankruptcy is what Mitt Romney had talked about. And, of course, we feel that the unions got quite a nice deal out of the controlled bankruptcy that the president did. So there's still some inherent problems that probably still exist at those car companies. And, I hope for the best. We want our American companies to do well. I'm a car guy, I've got GM cars, I've got Fords, I've got everything. So I really hope the best for our car companies, but some inherent weaknesses were not fixed.
David.
So we have to...
Dana, thank you very much. So we're going to have to throw it back to Doha and David. Scott, thank you very much indeed. Scott Heidler there I think it's the Barley something in Akron, Ohio. We'll be back with you a little bit later on. I'm going to just bring you some news from Virginia, or rather some news of lack of news, because shortly after the top of the hour, when I came on air, we were expecting to hear a little bit about what was going on in this swing state, but we are told by officials there now that they won't be reporting anything until after the top of the next hour, which is, only a few minutes away, because there's been some delays in voting and they don't want to say anything that might influence those voters who've yet to cast their votes. On that note, let's bring in Dick Durbin, Democratic Senator from Illinois, joining us now live from Chicago. The man who introduced Barack Obama effectively to the world senator at the 2004 Democratic National Convention. He's come a long way, hasn't he?
He certainly has. And I can recall a little over 5 years ago sitting down with him for the first time and saying, "You need to run for president, Barack." He was a little surprised at the suggestion, but others joined me in that chorus. He took our invitation and went on to be elected to his first term. Tonight, we're hoping that second term will be a deal that's closed by the American people.
What did you see in him at that stage that he didn't see in himself?
An extraordinary ability to appeal and reach people. I saw it at the convention in Boston, then I saw it in his campaign for the United States Senate here in Illinois, where he just drew crowds in numbers we'd never seen before. Then he went to the Senate, and in the first 2 years made a dramatic impact. Even as a freshman senator, people were listening and watching him carefully, and I knew that he could add a voice to the American political scene that was very important in our history.
What do you think he will be disappointed about after having served almost 4 years as U.S. president? Because he came in on such a wave of optimism, and as he pointed out, the job's turned his hair grey.
Well, I think it was stunning that the Republicans just said from the beginning, "We're not going to help you. We won't work with you." In fact, one of the leading Republican senators, Mitch McConnell, said, "We want you to be a one-term president. That's what we're going to focus on." So many of the problems that we had to solve in America, we had to do as Democrats, with little or no help from the other side. I hope now with the end of the campaign tonight, it'll be the end of the campaign in Congress, and we can roll up our sleeves and both parties finally work together to solve some of our nation's problems.
Senator, thank you very much indeed. Dick Durbin, Senator from Illinois, the man who sort of said to Barack Obama, I think I've got a job for you, or a job you should apply for. Senator, we thank you very much indeed. We are off to Boston, and Alan Fisher is there with the Romney campaign. Alan, over to you.
I think there's a quiet optimism here. Interesting that Dick Durbin was talking about how Barack Obama really exploded onto the national scene with his performance at the Democratic National Convention here in Boston 8 years ago, and it's hoping, the Republicans are hoping that it'll be a team from Boston that will finally bring him down. There's been some cheers with some of the states that have been declared for Mitt Romney. None of them real surprises when you hear that West Virginia is going Republican blue. We also know that we believe that some of the other states that have been called, Indiana, for example, were always going to go into the Romney column, but we're still waiting for the big ones. It's Ohio, it's Virginia, and it's Pennsylvania. Remember, Mitt Romney has spent a lot of time there in the last couple of days. His team and also those who support him have spent a great deal of money in Pennsylvania as well, believing it is now in play. And the Democrats are aware of that. That is why Bill Clinton on Monday attended 4 events in the state. It's all about expanding the map. Perhaps what we've been hearing from the Romney camp in the last half hour or so is that they think Ohio might just be beyond their grasp. But if they can make that up by winning Pennsylvania, suddenly it's a contest again. So that is why the Republicans are quietly confident with what's going to happen over the next couple of hours, David.
The point is, Alan, that no Republican has ever won the presidency without Ohio, and Mitt Romney's people have acknowledged that if it goes, then it's going to be a very, very hard and long night. Would you think they're just putting a brave face on it by saying, look, you know, we can do it in another way?
Well, look at the conventional wisdom that has been blown apart by this election campaign. First of all, we were told that you had to have momentum if you were a Republican going into the primaries. And Mitt Romney won 1 of the first 3. We were told that no Republican can ever get the nomination if you don't win South Carolina. Newt Gingrich won that. Then remember, we were told that debates don't move polls, and we had that debate in Denver, and Mitt Romney got a great deal of momentum from that. In fact, the momentum that has put him so close to Barack Obama over the last couple of months. And now people are saying, well, you can't win the White House unless you win Ohio. Statistically, that's correct, but if you look at what's happened over this election campaign, can anyone make those sort of predictions anymore? So I think that the Romney campaign are saying, look, we might not win Ohio, and what would cost him dearly is the comment he made probably about 10 days ago when he said that Jeep, the car manufacturer, were going to move one of their plants out to China, and the head of Jeep had to step in and say, no, that's not true. That would have hurt him badly in Ohio, but if he's going to lose Ohio, he had to look at another way. And Pennsylvania and his attacks on Barack Obama, particularly in coal country, seemed to be scoring points, and that is when that race tightened. So, does he need Ohio? No, he doesn't, because if he's got another route to 270, that means he can still win, and that is what the Romney campaign are certainly hoping for. And when we were in New Hampshire with them just on Monday night, just about 24 hours ago, they were saying that Pennsylvania is definitely in play. 3 weeks ago, that was a Barack Obama banker. That's how much this has changed because of Mitt Romney's performance in Denver.
Yeah, we are going to talk with our panel. Alan, thanks very much indeed. Talk with our panel in just a moment about that car. Well, the car gaffe made by Mitt Romney just a couple of weeks ago, the China comments, the Italian comments as well. And it's also worth pointing out, if I've got a second here, that in 2004, John Kerry was leading in Ohio by 4 points just 2 or 3 days before the election, and he lost it to George Bush. So perhaps what the pollsters are saying about the state of play in Ohio isn't giving us too much of an indication, but we'll get some indication of what's happening elsewhere. A number of other swing states have seen the polls close, Kamal?
Exactly, David. We've just gone 100 hours GMT, which is 8 p.m. on the east coast of the United States. And we've got Florida to tell you about, and of course we're too close to call at this stage. 29 electoral college votes, which is 2 more than last time, just the way Ohio went 2 down. Florida's gone 2 up with the way the population has changed. It's tight at the moment, isn't it? There is only about 50,000 votes separating there. Another swing state, New Hampshire, with 4 electoral college votes, is too close to call, even with that apparent split there. And I want to go through a few other results for you, projections at least, as they come through. Now, bear with me, because these are coming straight through into my ear and out my mouth as we go. Alabama with 9 electoral college votes. That one goes to Mitt Romney. Next, we're looking at Connecticut. Actually, Tennessee, I'm sorry, 11 there, stay with Mitt Romney. Now we're going to Connecticut, heading up to the northeast of the United States. And a lot of these are very much strong blue states, so 7 there for Barack Obama. Rhode Island is also in play now, and that is Barack Obama's with 4 there, as is the nation's capital, the District of Columbia, which is not actually a state, but plays like a state for the presidential election, so 3 go to Barack Obama. We're back south with 7 for Mitt Romney in Oklahoma. Just point out these are all very much according to the script, very much what we expected. Delaware with 3 back up in the northeast. That is Barack Obama's. We go to Barack Obama's home state now, Illinois, and that should be safe. If it's not, we've got problems. Projected winner, yeah, he is projected winner there at the moment for Illinois, Barack Obama in his home state. Mississippi will be looking for Mitt Romney in the south with its 6 electoral college votes. We're just bouncing back and forth. We're going to go to Massachusetts now, back up in the northeast corner. And that is Barack Obama's with 11, as is Maryland's, as is Maine as well. So 10 in Maryland, Maine up in the furthest eastern corner is 4. And then one more to tell you about Georgia, which we actually mentioned an hour ago now. That is now a projected win for Mitt Romney with 16. A lot to take in. This should make some sense of it all right now. The Electoral College scoreboard, the state of the race, and it changes a lot from the last time. Remember, it was 33-3 for Mitt Romney last time. Now Barack Obama, with all those projected wins, moves up to 65. Mitt Romney to 82. It's still a long way to 270, of course. Don't forget that. So don't, again, read too much into this, because it's pretty much all going according to the script. The script, as it looks on the map, is like this. Any second now, we'll get this coloured up. And there we go. So let's think about our swing states. We've got Florida. We've got Virginia, North Carolina, we've got Ohio, and we've got New Hampshire, all too close to call. Anything you see on this map in yellow, this is a real map, results as they've come in, are too close to call. And the blues and the reds are actually 9 states each, as far as state count go. But we know it's electoral college that counts, and we're at 82-65, I think it was, in favour of Mitt Romney at this point. There you go, David.
Come on, thanks very much indeed. Let's bring in Jennifer Lovin, former White House correspondent for the Associated Press. You were listening to Alan Fisher in Boston there saying that perhaps Romney's people have given up on Ohio. And he was saying it could be because of this mistake he made about saying that all these jobs from Jeep were going to go to China, and he blamed the Italians as well. That was a huge mistake, perhaps.
I think it was a big mistake, but let's sort of look at the longer game a little bit. And Obama has had, if not a big lead, at least a small lead in Ohio for a few weeks now. So it wouldn't be completely shocking for Obama to win Ohio. I think Pennsylvania. Alan was talking about Pennsylvania and the Romney camp's hopes for pulling that into their column. That seems less likely. Again, everything is close, and the race in Pennsylvania seems to have been tightening over the past couple of weeks, so it's not out of the realm. But Ohio, no question, very closely contested, and Romney made a play in that state by making it was actually an ad where he said that Jeep was shipping jobs off to China, and he was quickly and roundly contradicted by none other than the automaker chiefs, who said that's not true. They put out statements saying that this ad is not true, and it was a big gaffe for him.
And there is a sentiment too, isn't there, that Obama did manage to save the automotive industry.
Absolutely, and that is a big issue in Ohio.
I spoke to a couple of people who knew a lot about that ad and about what happened. And on the one hand, the outsiders that I spoke to said what it looked like was, sorry for the sports analogy, I hate using sports terms, but this one really works, a Hail Mary pass. It was the end of the football game. The only way you win it is a great big long pass to get to the goal line.
The Hail Mary pass being one where you just sort of cross yourself and say,
toss it up. You got it.
Put it in God's hands.
Right. And there was a sense of desperation about this commercial for one main reason. It was so easy to prove wrong. And then I did hear from someone who spoke to somebody inside the Romney campaign that, in fact, they didn't care how wrong it was because people talked about it. And the minute they talked about it, then they took any momentum away from the president and what was going on there. Negative advertising is very insidious, David. It is very insidious.
I don't care what you call me as long as you call me.
Exactly right. And there is some thought that this was done by way of saying because, by the way, even after the heads of the auto companies, as Jennifer points out, said this is not true, the head of Chrysler, the head of Jeep, they then expanded the ad, or said they were going to, into other states. So it's funny business, politics, and sometimes it's really ugly.
Okay, we were talking a little while ago about Florida, the history of Florida. In 2000, it could prove an interesting state again this time. Andy Gallagher is there live for us in Tampa.
Yeah, Florida really is an interesting state. Remember back in the year 2000 that you were just referencing there, George Bush won the presidency by 537 votes. But what makes Florida more important in this election is the number of electoral college votes. 29. It's the biggest amount of electoral college votes amongst all the battleground states. Any result here will be a real early indicator of what's happening in this election overall. But joining us now is Sean Kassan, who's from a local radio station. Sean, Mitt Romney really needs the state of Florida. What happens if he doesn't win here?
Well, it is hard to see Mitt Romney winning enough electoral college votes to win the presidency unless he wins Florida. And for weeks, the polls have been saying that Florida is so close. It's just the closest of races. And so if he doesn't win Florida, Mitt Romney would have to win almost all the other battleground states. And that's just statistically not very likely.
Now, you've been covering the election for the entire year. What's your sense when you talk to voters here? What's on their mind? Because many of the ones I've met are really torn between these two candidates. They like what Mitt Romney says about the economy, but they like what the president says about things like women's rights.
Well, I think the election is going to come down to which of the two camps gets their voters out to the polls. And we thought that there might be a huge drop-off in support for Obama from 4 years ago in Florida. For months, it looked like Romney might take the state pretty easily, but there's kind of been an enthusiasm pickup for the Obama camp in early voting, in vote by mail. There's been a lot of Democrats who have voted, and now we'll only see if Mitt Romney and the Republicans can draw out enough people on election day to make up that difference.
Now, we've spent the last few days traveling along the I-4 corridor, the Interstate 4 highway. Explain to us why that is such an important piece of Florida, why it's almost a battleground within the battleground.
Yeah, well, South Florida always goes blue for the Democrats, and the Panhandle always goes red for the Republicans. And in the Central Florida battleground between St. Petersburg and Tampa, through Orlando and up to Daytona Beach, it's anybody's game. Depending who wins that could win the entire state of Florida, and that could determine the entire election.
Now, you hear why Florida is so important, and you hear that it may be the Latino vote that throws it, or it may be the retired vote or the young vote. Who do you think amongst this melting pot that is the Sunshine State is perhaps the most important vote?
Well, the Latino vote is certainly important, and in Central Florida there are a lot of people who come from Puerto Rico, and since they're United States citizens, they can vote, and certainly the Latino vote is going to, I would think, even in a state like Florida with a Cuban vote, I think is going to lean toward the Democrats. I know that the traditional wisdom is that the Miami Cubans will vote Republican, but I think also the younger Latinos are also going to vote Democrat in this election, and so that could very much turn the election.
And if Florida is about anything, it's about changing demographics. You just talked about Puerto Ricans there. Kissimmee has the second largest population outside of New York. They're all relatively new arrivals. Just how important are demographics here in Florida?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the age demographics, and age is certainly important. Florida has an older population than a lot of states, and they tend to be more conservative. So will the youth turn out in the numbers that they turned out 4 years ago. But Latinos and also other immigrants, that if they have citizenship, how are they going to vote? It could be really important.
Sean, very quickly, a prediction?
It's very close. I think Romney will win Florida, but I think Obama will win the Electoral College.
Thank you very much, Sean. So there you go. That's why Florida is such an important state. It's all about those changing demographics, those new arrivals, that aging population. It's why it's such a melting pot. But it's why, especially in our journey over the last few days along that Interstate 4 highway, that you get a real look into the soul of the American voter, because you meet every kind of voter here in Florida. And of course, it is the kingmaker state with 29 electoral college votes.
Yeah, go down to Key West, Andy, if you haven't done it already, and you will certainly see all kinds of Americans down there. That's Andy Gallagher in Tampa. Talking about these elections, not just about choosing the president, also about electing a group of lawmakers who can either push forward or, in many cases, block the president's policies. We're going to see 33 seats being contested in the Senate, as well as all of the seats in the House of Representatives, 400 plus there, but 33 in the Senate. And as Kimberly Halkett reports, the outcome could make the difference between partisan deadlock and political progress.
As a new U.S. citizen, Javier Urbina will finally get the chance to vote. But he's concerned the first ballot he casts will do little to change the political gridlock he sees between the U.S. Congress and the White House.
They just continuously oppose each other, and the president can't do anything because Congress has to make the laws, not the president. So I don't think they work together well.
Incredibly, that was what was intended back in 1787, when America's 3 equal branches of government, the Supreme Court, the presidency, and Congress, were created in the U.S. Constitution.
They didn't want to concentrate the power in anybody's hands. They wanted to make sure that if power was spread out and divided, that it would prevent tyranny.
It may have prevented tyranny, but it's also caused big problems for many U.S. presidents. Take Democrat Bill Clinton. His dispute in 1995 with a Republican head of the House of Representatives over spending led to the U.S. government shutting down for 28 days. Clinton's predecessor, George H.W. Bush, also had a hostile relationship with Congress and often had to rely on veto power to shape or overturn legislation. Barack Obama didn't fare much better. Although he came into office with members of his own party in control of the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate, he was never able to rally the support of his opponents and build the coalitions necessary for creating legislation. So Obama began bypassing Congress altogether, instead issuing executive orders to accomplish his agenda.
When Congress refuses to act, and as a result hurts our economy and puts our people at risk, then I have an obligation as president to do what I can without them.
But Javier Urbina isn't convinced that's the solution to getting Congress and the next president to cooperate.
Whoever it might be, I hope that they can work together better, that, they're not just opposing each other's bills just for political reasons, but actually what would make the country better.
After waiting almost 2 decades to be a part of the U.S. system of democracy, one of the country's newest citizens says he simply wants it to work.
And we'll join Kimberly live for us in Richmond, in Virginia. A lot to talk about there, and a lot for you to concentrate on over the course of the next few hours.
David, it's very loud here right now. I'll tell you, I'll just set the scene of where we are. I'm at the watch party for the Democratic candidate, the Senate candidate, here in Richmond, Virginia. Obviously, they're getting very excited as these results are waiting for them to come in. And I want to give you a little update on that, because we haven't had the results. We thought that we might have them by now. But in fact, there are still people lined up at the polls in Virginia. And so there has been a decision by the State Board of Elections that, in fact, they will not release these results because they don't want to influence those who still have not cast their ballots. There's been a tremendous voter turnout in this state, not just for the race for the Senate, but also for the race for the White House. I want to bring in Chad Murphy. He is a political scientist
with the University of Mary Washington, Fredericksburg, Virginia. Talk to me a little bit about this sort of robust turnout. Who is that likely to benefit when we talk about the race for the White House?
Well, I think it's going to be very good for Barack Obama. We knew the Tea Party was going to come out to oppose him. We knew they were going to come out to defeat him. But the fact that we've had so many voters come out is probably a good sign for President Obama's re-election chances.
And let's talk a little bit about the Senate race. We are at a watch party for the Senate candidates. Who is likely to benefit most? We're talking about two very popular former governors, both Tim Kaine as well as George Allen, the Republican candidate. Who is likely to benefit most from the campaigning by the governor or the President of the United States?
Well, I think definitely Tim Kaine will benefit again. President Obama got his supporters out. Tim Kaine got his supporters out as well. I think that's a great sign for the Democrats in the state overall, keeping Virginia blue.
And Virginia is an interesting state to be watching. But not only that, we're watching who's going to really control the Senate. That is the other big story that will be coming out of election 2012. Democrats currently are holding the control of the U.S. Senate. But talk to me a little bit about whether or not they'll be able to retain it.
Well, it looks good for the Democrats. The Republicans' hopes hung on Tim Kaine losing, as well as a couple other key states, Indiana, Maine, things like that. So I think it's going to be the Democrats will be able to hold on to the Senate despite early predictions.
But we're going to watch very, very closely as well. The people who are here in this room are watching them, waiting for these results very closely. We are expecting them at any time. But again, such a tremendous turnout in the state of Virginia that we are awaiting those results that have been delayed.
Kimberly, thanks very much indeed. Fighting against the noise there, the background noise. We're going from Richmond, Virginia, just a little bit north, back to Washington, D.C. And Malika Bilal, co-host of Al Jazeera social media talk show The Stream, joining us now live and brightening things up, I see, Malika.
Thanks, David. Well, our community is reacting, and the hashtag #StayInLine is trending. Jessica tweets, "If you're in line at a polling station, don't leave no matter what anyone tells you. Stand up for your right to vote. #StayInLine." And Sarah says, one hashtag, one thing to remember, stay in line. And of course, they're also sharing videos about those lines.
We've been standing in line for about 45 minutes, and the line goes actually outside the building and down the block.
I waited almost 3 hours, but regardless of the wait, the energy was high.
So this morning I woke up to go before work and ended up waiting in line for 2 hours.
The polling stations had lines outside the door, which made me very happy that I had sent in my absentee ballot last week.
Well, with us to discuss all the social media reactions is John Stanton, Washington, D.C. bureau chief for the leading social news site BuzzFeed. John, what are you seeing online?
We're seeing a lot of this sort of traffic about people, long lines. I mean, in places like Virginia, Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, the swing states, people are really turning out a lot to vote. And it's been surprising, I think, when you look at that. I think there was a lot of expectation that younger voters weren't going to come out this year, that they weren't as energetic, that Obama's campaign had done a pretty poor job of getting them excited. And as we're seeing on Twitter and on Facebook and in real life with people standing out there in these lines, that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. It does seem like younger voters are turning out in much bigger numbers, at least anecdotally, than people had expected.
So that enthusiasm gap is not necessarily there.
Not nearly what people thought, yeah.
Okay. Well, we're even seeing President Obama tweeting this message on my screen here. If you're in line when the polls close, stay in line to vote. It could help make the difference. John, what do you make of that?
I mean, it's that last second get out the young vote message, I think. And, people don't realize in a lot of states that once you're in line, you can vote. And, people sometimes go in the morning and they don't want to stay in line because they got to get to work. Mm-hmm. So they leave because the lines are long. And I think, they do start to get concerned that those people may not go back, or they'll see the line and they won't really think it matters anymore. And so, especially with some of the states starting to already report their numbers, they want to make sure that those people stay in line as long as possible, especially in places, again, like Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania. They want to get as many people out to vote as possible.
Right. Well, others are wondering if voter suppression will impact the results. There are alleged instances in the swing state of Ohio. The Columbus Free Press posted these videos.
He has a driver's license, and they are rejecting him. That is a valid driver's license.
And the only reason they're rejecting you is because they said the address is wrong on your...
Yeah, he said the address is wrong.
And look, you have your registration right there.
I went and got mail out of my car to show where I live.
but you still tell me I can't vote. I've been here since 11 o'clock. My granddaughter has to be at school at 12:30, and I'm fighting for my rights to vote. And I just don't feel that it's fair.
Well, John, those are anecdotal reports, but is the story gaining traction?
Absolutely, I think it is. I think that they are anecdotal right now. We haven't seen any widespread evidence of this, but for these people, this is obviously a huge deal that it's happening to them, and I think it is a big concern, even if it's just a handful of people across the country. It's a concern.
Right, and of course, being captured on social media. Well, all eyes are on the swing states, and joining us on Google Plus is a panel of swing state voters. Jason Emert, you're a Republican in Miami. Florida is key. What are you seeing and hearing?
Florida, I think, has just been long lines, and there's been delays in places. Anecdotally, again, is up to 3 to 4 hours. But then I've heard also in places like Little Havana, just down the street where I am, that it was 45 minutes to an hour at some of the peak time. It's just been a tremendous effort on both sides to get out the vote, and Florida, and this area specifically, is a very high turnout today.
Well, Laura Fields, you're a Democrat in Virginia. The race is neck and neck there. What are you hearing?
The turnout's been great. It's looking really close right now. I'm very hopeful, and the energy is high for Obama. But we're never going to know until they call it. So hopefully they'll call it for Obama.
Well, Jordan Harris, you're chair of the Penn State College Republicans. The state was solidly in Obama's camp, but may not be tonight. How's it looking?
Oh, well, we never felt like it was solidly in Obama's camp, and I think that Republican voters all over the state have responded in that way. Very mixed support today and very high levels of support all day.
Mason Cole, you're president of the Dartmouth Dems in New Hampshire, another toss-up state. What are you seeing?
We saw extremely high turnout. At one point, we thought we might even surpass the 08 numbers. We fell just a little bit. Sorry about that, automatic lights. But we fell just a little bit shy of reaching that goal. But we had 7,500 voters in our town last time. We had 7,000 this time. So we're very excited about the high turnout.
Well, thank you to everyone for hanging out with us. And, of course, we'll be looking out for your tweets. So use the hashtag AJStream. David?
We thank you very much indeed. Right, our correspondents who are in Chicago and in Boston, Alan Fisher and Patty Culhane. Alan, of course, with Mitt Romney's crowd. Patty there with Barack Obama's mob in Illinois. Fighting the noise, both of you, I know where you happen to be. But Patty, respond to this one. Alan was suggesting last time I spoke to him that Mitt Romney may have already given up on Ohio. Is that the message getting through to your people there?
Well, I can tell you, David, the Obama campaign seems very confident, more so than they were just a couple of hours ago. Obviously, they do their own research. They have their own exit polls. But I've been seeing a lot of smiles as I walk around this hall. I just want to set the scene for you here. The crowd has started to come in. It's going to be a couple of hours. In fact, we don't actually have a time for when the president is going to speak. Obviously, it could be a very late night. The campaign's been saying maybe midnight our time, maybe 1 in the morning. They think that they might actually have the results. Of course, a lot of other people are saying it's not going to happen tonight because it is, they expect, going to be such an incredibly close race. But the campaign feels very strongly that if the president can win Ohio, that they believe that they will get Pennsylvania, even though they've seen Governor Romney spend time there lately, spend a lot of money there. They still think that they're more likely than not to take Pennsylvania. But again, they do expect that it's going to be a close race. The president doing his part, I want to point out, David, he did make a few phone calls, but he also has the superstition. The one time in one of the primaries that he didn't play basketball on the day of the election, New Hampshire, he lost to Hillary Clinton. So we saw the president make sure he had time for a friendly pickup game of basketball. They believe that that's just a must if they're going to have any chance of winning this election.